it was also an absolute economic collapse. I mean, we can't even really imagine that.
So do you think that right now in 2017, as we stand here on, I think today's May 5th, that we're at a strange place related to both of these worlds you're talking about? Because I sense that what's happening here is that we don't trust the news sources anymore in the way that we used to. We don't trust the politicians in the way we used to. We are all catering information to ourselves online, all of this stuff, so that our known world, what we would describe as this world right here, that I think is starting to fray a little bit. Do you agree with that premise?
Yes.
And what do you think that means for our ability to cope with the other world?
Well, part of what makes people peaceful, because we like to think we're peaceful, but we're not. We're neither peaceful nor anxiety-free. In fact, I would say that the normative human being is just as much terrified and murderous as calm and collected. Everything has to be right for you to be calm and collected. Now, the reason you and I can sit here and talk is because we share a very large number of assumptions. And so I don't really see you. I see this facade for this time that you're manifesting out of politeness and because you're socialized.
Yeah.
And you see that of me. And that means that we're two primates who can sit here and have a discussion without it breaking down into anything resembling, say, violence.
Right, but very quickly you could whip out a knife and the whole game would change.
Oh, yes,
and you'd
yes.
see how quickly my facade would disappear. There's
a fantastic scene in a book by Dostoevsky called The Possessed, or The Devils, which is a great book, by the way. It's one of the books that outlines where we're headed, I would say, even though it was written more than 100 years ago. Because it's about people who are possessed by an ideology that's very much like the social justice ideology that's emerged again. There's one scene in there, I think the character's name is Stavrogan, but he's breaking down because these belief systems are starting to shift around, and he isn't sure how to conceptualize himself. And at one point, I may have the character's name wrong, he goes into this club, you know, it's like an elite aristocratic club, and there's an old general sitting in there, and he grabs him by the nose and pulls him out onto the street, which, you know, in one sense, it's not a particularly brutal thing to do, but it's such a violation, it was such a violation of the social norm that it just caused absolute outrage. And that's a good example. It's like I wouldn't have to be particularly different. I wouldn't have to pull out a knife in order to destabilize the conversation.
Right.
There's lots of subtly strange things that you could do or that I could do that would put a real undercurrent into the conversation. You can experience that sometimes if you ever happen to talk to someone who's psychopathic and you get a sense of that's actually what they're like. There's videos online of Paul Bernardo, and I would recommend that people take a look at those because they'll give you some sense of what can be bubbling underneath the surface.
Yeah.
So part of the reason that belief systems regulate people's emotions, aggression and fear, let's say, and disgust, many emotions, is because we act them out in the world. And as long as we're both acting out the same set of assumptions, then we can get what we want from each other because we can predict each other's behavior and we can cooperate easily. We can even compete because we know the rules of competition. But if that shared structure starts to fall apart, then I don't know what you're going to be like.
So that I think gets to what my question is, that I sense that that's starting to fall apart. I think the basic societal norms, the way we react to each other, it has a lot to do with social media and how we, you know, the outrage machine and how we destroy each other and judge each other. And I see some of this now leaking out into Antifa violence and that, you know, that the trust in our institutions is so low that I think all of the things that we've been basing our democracy on for the last, certainly for at least the last 50 years, they seem to be frayed right now. And I'm wondering, as you're saying this, what would you, it almost seems to me you'd only have to give it a light tap to
Well-
really unfurl so much?
Well,
of
I
it?
think, a nice economic collapse like 2008 would do it. And I think that's the sort of thing that happened in Nazi Germany in the 20s and the 30s. It wasn't just brutalized men back from World War I, and it wasn't just the conflict between communism and fascism. I mean, communism was a real threat, right, because the Russian Revolution had just occurred. It was also an absolute economic collapse. I mean, we can't even really imagine that, and it would be, in some sense, far worse today because the machine is more complex and people are farther away from primary sources of food, for example. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, we could get unlucky, and in the present state of chaos, dawning chaos, then things could fall apart badly.